Two children were dying in the middle of the most expensive restaurant in New York City. Their lips were turning a terrifying shade of indigo. A room full of the city's most dangerous men, armed with Glocks and trained to kill, stood frozen in panic. They could stop a bullet, but they couldn't stop biology. The father, a man who ruled the underworld with an iron fist, looked helpless for the first time in his life. Then a waitress, a nobody with holes in her shoes and a shift that wouldn't end, stepped past the security line. She didn't scream. She didn't call 911. She made one simple gesture that changed everything, and she did it with a gun pressed to her temple. The Gilded Lily wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater of wealth where the admission ticket was your dignity. Agnes Jenkins adjusted her apron, wincing as the coarse fabric rubbed against the bruise on her hip, a parting gift from the coffee table she'd bumped into while rushing out of her shoebox apartment in Queens that morning. Table 4 needs water. Now, Agnes, move it, hissed Gerard, the floor manager. Gerard had a face like a ferret and the soul of a toll booth operator. I'm going, Gerard, Agnes muttered, grabbing the crystal pitcher. She was exhausted. Her brother, Toby, had been in and out of rehab for 3 years. Every cent she made went to the clinic on 4th Street, the only one that didn't treat him like a criminal. She carried a heavy bag of emotional luggage and, more practically, a heavy tote bag in her locker containing the grim realities of loving an addict, spare cash, a change of clothes, and 2 doses of Narcan. Just in case. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted at 8:15 p.m. It wasn't a sound. It was a vacuum. The air was sucked out of the room as the heavy oak doors swung open. Alethea Moretti walked in. You didn't need to read the tabloids to know who he was. He wore a suit that cost more than Agnes's entire life earnings, tailored to fit broad shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of the city. His eyes were dark, devoid of light, scanning the room for threats before he even took a step. He was the head of the Moretti crime family, a man whose name was whispered in fear from the Bronx to the Battery. But tonight, he wasn't just a boss. He was a father. Flanking him were 2 smaller figures, twins, a boy and a girl, no older than 4. They were dressed like miniature dolls, the girl in a velvet dress, the boy in a tiny blazer. They looked terrified, not of their father, but of the world. Corner booth, Alethea commanded. His voice was low, like gravel grinding under a boot. 4 bodyguards, massive men with necks as thick as tree trunks, fanned out. They secured the perimeter, eyeing every patron, every waiter, every shadow. Agnes felt a shiver trace her spine. She tried to make herself invisible, but Gerard shoved her forward. Moretti's table, you take it. Don't speak unless spoken to. Do not look him in the eye. And for the love of God, don't spill. Agnes swallowed hard. She walked towards the corner booth, her hands trembling slightly. Sparkling water, Alethea said without looking up. He was busy cutting the twins' steak into microscopic, safe pieces. It was a tender action that clashed violently with the cold deadness of his eyes. And apple juice, sealed bottles. I want to hear the seal crack. Yes, sir, Agnes whispered. She watched the twins. The girl, Mia, had big, watery eyes. The boy, Leo, was gripping his fork like a weapon. They were silent. Too silent for children. Eat, Alethea said softly. It's safe. The bodyguards watched the kitchen staff like hawks. Alethea didn't trust anyone. He had tasted the food first, waiting 2 minutes before letting his children take a bite. Paranoia was the price of power. Agnes retreated to the shadows, watching. She knew that look in Alethea's eyes. It was the same look she saw in the mirror every day, the exhaustion of being the only thing standing between a loved one and disaster. The twins ate slowly. Agnes returned to refill a wineglass at a nearby table, her back to the Morettis. That was when she heard the sound. It wasn't a scream. It was softer. A wet, rattling gasp, then the clatter of silverware hitting the fine china. Agnes turned. Leo was clutching his throat. His eyes were bulging, wide orbs of panic. Beside him, Mia had gone rigid, her small hands clawing at the tablecloth. "Leo! Mia!" Alethea's voice cracked like a whip. He stood up so fast his chair flew backward and crashed into the wall. The entire restaurant went dead silent. "They're choking!" Alethea roared, grabbing Leo. He spun the boy around, his massive hands trying to perform the Heimlich maneuver on the tiny frame. But he was too strong, too panicked. He was shaking the boy rather than helping him. "Boss, get back!" a bodyguard shouted, rushing in. "Do something!" Alethea screamed. His composure shattered. "Help them!" But the twins weren't coughing. No sound was coming out. Agnes took a step forward, squinting. She had seen choking before. This didn't look like choking. Leo wasn't just turning red. A terrifying greyish-blue pallor was spreading from his lips to his cheeks with unnatural speed. Alethea pounded on his son's back. Nothing dislodged. Mia slumped forward into her mashed potatoes, her body going limp. "Call 911!" someone shrieked. "No time!" Alethea yelled. He looked at his dying children, terror ripping through his stoic mask. The most powerful man in New York was powerless. The bodyguards stood with their guns drawn, aiming at nothing, helpless against an invisible enemy. Agnes's heart hammered against her ribs. She recognized the signs, the pinpoint pupils, the rigid chests, the sudden onset of cyanosis, turning blue. It wasn't food. It wasn't an allergy. It was an overdose. How? Her mind raced. The juice, the water, it didn't matter. They had seconds. Agnes dropped her tray. The sound of shattering glass broke the trance. She ran. "Get back!" The shout came from the lead bodyguard, a man named Russo. He leveled a 9mm pistol directly at Agnes's face as she sprinted towards the booth. She didn't stop. Most people, when faced with a gun, freeze. It is a primal instinct. But Agnes Jenkins had spent the last 3 years pulling her brother out of crack houses, stepping over needles and staring down dealers who threatened to slit her throat for $20. She had been inoculated against fear by the sheer exhaustion of survival. "I said back off," Russo roared, his finger tightening on the trigger. "They aren't choking, you idiot!" Agnes screamed, her voice raw and guttural. "They're overdosing. Look at their eyes." She didn't wait for permission. She didn't look at Alethea. She dove under the barrel of Russo's gun, sliding on her knees across the polished floor to a bag, which she had stashed behind the service station earlier, against protocol. "Shoot her!" another guard yelled. "Wait!" Alethea's voice cut through the chaos. He was holding Leo's limp body, looking at the boy's blue lips. He looked at Agnes. He saw the desperation in her movements. "Wait!" Agnes ripped the zipper of her tote bag. Her hands, usually steady, were shaking, but her muscle memory took over. She shoved aside her apron, her bus pass, and grabbed the small orange box. Narcan. Naloxone. She scrambled back to the twins. Russo stepped in her way, a wall of muscle. "Move, or I swear to God I will kill you myself!" Agnes snarled at the bodyguard. She didn't look like a waitress anymore. She looked like a lioness. She pushed past him. He let her pass, stunned by her ferocity. She reached Mia first. The little girl was almost gone. Her breath was shallow, barely a whisper. Agnes tore the package open with her teeth, grabbed the nasal spray, tilted Mia's head back, and shoved the nozzle into the child's small nostril. Click! She plunged the plunger. "What did you do?" Alethea bellowed, grabbing Agnes's arm with a grip that threatened to snap her bone. "What did you give her?" "Let me go," Agnes yelled back, looking him dead in the eye. "It's Narcan. They've been poisoned with opioids, probably fentanyl. If you don't let me do the boy, he's dead in 30 seconds. Alethea stared at her. The word fentanyl hit him like a physical blow. He looked at the orange device in her hand. He looked at his son, whose face was now the color of a bruise. He released her arm. "Do it!" Agnes wasted no time. She grabbed her second dose. She always carried 2. Toby always needed 2. And turned to Leo. He was heavier, his jaw locked tight. She pinched his nose, forced the angle, and administered the spray. Then silence. The restaurant was a tomb. The diners were cowering under tables. The staff was huddled in the kitchen doorway. Agnes sat back on her heels, gasping for air. Her knees were bleeding through her stockings where she'd slid. She looked at her watch. 1 minute. 2 minutes. "Come on," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "Come on, baby. Breathe." Alethea was kneeling beside her, his hand on Leo's chest. He was trembling. The terrifying Mafia Don was trembling. Suddenly Mia gasped. It was a horrible, retching sound, like a vacuum seal breaking. Her little body convulsed, and she began to cry. A loud, wailing, beautiful cry. "Mia!" Alethea lunged for her, pulling her into his chest. Seconds later, Leo's eyes flew open. He coughed violently, vomiting the expensive steak onto the floor, sucking in air like a drowning man breaking the surface. "Oh, thank God," Agnes sobbed, her adrenaline crashing. She slumped back against the booth, covering her face with her hands. Alethea held both his weeping children, burying his face in their hair. He rocked them back and forth, whispering Italian prayers mixed with curses. The bodyguards lowered their guns, looking at each other in confusion and shame. They had been ready to shoot the only person who knew how to save the boss's life. After a long moment, the crying subsided to whimpers. Alethea kissed Leo's forehead, then Mia's. He slowly raised his head. His eyes found Agnes. She was still on the floor, trying to gather her composure. She wiped her hands on her apron, sudden fear replacing the adrenaline. She had just screamed at Alethea Moretti. She had touched his kids. She had drugs in her bag at a high-end restaurant. Alethea stood up. He seemed taller now, if that was possible. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating fury that was even scarier. He handed the children to Russo, who held them gently. Alethea walked over to Agnes. He towered over her. She flinched, expecting a strike, expecting to be fired, expecting to be silenced. Instead, Alethea extended a hand. His palm was calloused, rough, and steady. "Stand up," he said. It wasn't a request. Agnes took his hand. He pulled her to her feet effortlessly. He didn't let go immediately. He looked at her face, studying her features, her fear, the cheap uniform, the intelligent eyes. "You carry Narcan in your purse," he stated. "My brother," Agnes managed to choke out. "He's sick. I have to be ready." Alethea nodded slowly. He looked at the empty orange vials on the floor. Then he looked at the untouched glasses of apple juice on the table. "Russo," Alethea said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Seal this table. Nobody leaves. Nobody touches the food. I want the kitchen staff lined up in the back alley. Now." "Yes, boss." Alethea turned back to Agnes. "Or you saved them. When my men I pay millions to protect me, stood there like statues, you moved." I knew the signs," Agnes stammered. "You risked your life. Russo would have shot you." "I know." Alethea reached into his jacket pocket. Agnes thought he was reaching for a wallet, perhaps to give her a tip and send her away. Instead, he pulled out a black card with a gold emblem embossed on it. No numbers. Just a phone number. "What is your name?" he asked. "Agnes? Agnes Jenkins?" "Agnes Jenkins," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. "You are done here. You don't work for this restaurant anymore." Agnes's stomach dropped. "Please, sir, I need this job. My brother—" "You don't work here," Alethea interrupted, stepping closer, invading her personal space until all she could smell was expensive cologne and gunpowder. "Because you work for me now." What? "My children need a shadow. Someone who sees what others miss. Someone who doesn't freeze." He pressed the card into her hand. "Pack your bags, Miss Jenkins. I'll have a car at your apartment in Queens at 8 a.m. Do not be late." He didn't ask where she lived. He already knew. Alethea turned and walked away, scooping up his children, leaving Agnes standing in the wreckage of the dinner service, clutching the black card, unaware that she had just signed a contract with the devil. But as she would soon learn, the devil was the only one who could keep her safe. The morning sun over Queens didn't sparkle, it glared. It highlighted the grime on Agnes's window and the cracks in the ceiling of her fourth-floor walk-up. She was packing. It wasn't hard. She didn't own much. "You leaving?" The voice came from the doorway. It was Toby. He looked terrible. Skin grey, eyes hollowed out, scratching at his arm. He was only 22, but he looked 40. "I got a job, Tobes," Agnes said, folding her only good pair of jeans. "A live-in position. It pays. A lot. Enough to get you into that private facility in Vermont." "The one with the horses," Toby laughed, a bitter, dry sound. "Yeah, right. What kind of job pays for that? You selling yourself, Agnes?" "I'm a nanny," she snapped, zipping the bag. She walked over and grabbed his face gently. "I'm doing this for us. There's cash on the counter for food. Do not buy junk. If I come back and find needles, I'm done. Do you hear me?" Toby swatted her hand away, shame coloring his cheeks. "Just go." At exactly 8 a.m., the building shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the idle rumble of a V12 engine. Agnes looked out the window. A black Cadillac Escalade, armored and tinted, was double-parked, blocking the entire street. 2 men in suits stood by the doors. The neighbors were peering out from behind curtains, terrified. Agnes walked down the stairs, clutching her bag. The neighbors parted like the Red Sea. They knew who those cars belonged to. One of the men, a giant with a scar running through his eyebrow, took her bag. "Miss Jenkins, the boss is waiting." The drive to Sands Point on Long Island took an hour, but it felt like traveling to a different planet. They passed through massive iron gates that looked strong enough to stop a tank. The Moretti estate wasn't a house. It was a compound. High walls, cameras every 10 feet, and guards patrolling with German shepherds. The car stopped in front of a sprawling limestone mansion. The front door opened, and Alethea Moretti stepped out. He wasn't in a suit today. He wore dark jeans and a black t-shirt that clung to his chest. He looked less like a CEO and more like a soldier. "You're on time," he said, opening her door himself. "I need the money," Agnes said bluntly, stepping out. "For my brother." Alethea studied her. "Honesty, I like that. Come." He led her through the house. It was cold, museum-like. Beautiful art hung on the walls, but there were no family photos, no toys on the floor. It felt empty. "The staff has been vetted," Alethea said as they walked, "but I don't trust them. I don't trust anyone. That is why you are here." "Because I carry Narcan?" Agnes asked. "Because you act," Alethea corrected. He stopped at a heavy wooden door. "The twins are in here. Their mother. She died 2 years ago. Car bomb. It was meant for me." Agnes felt a chill. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be alert." Alethea opened the door. The playroom was massive, filled with every toy imaginable, but Leo and Mia were sitting quietly in the center of the room, playing with a simple set of blocks. They looked up, fear flashing in their eyes until they saw Agnes. "The juice lady," Leo chirped. It was the first time Agnes had heard him speak. Her heart melted a little. "Hi, Leo. Hi, Mia." She knelt down. Alethea leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "Your job is simple, Agnes. You watch them. You eat what they eat. You sleep in the room connecting to theirs. If they go to the park, you go. If they go to the bathroom, you stand outside the door. You are not a servant. You are their shield." "And if something happens?" Agnes asked, looking up at him. Alethea's eyes darkened. He reached behind his back and pulled out a small, sleek object. He held it out to her. It was a taser, military grade. "Then you make sure the threat doesn't walk away," he said. "Welcome to the family." 3 weeks passed. The mansion was a gilded cage, but Agnes was beginning to find a rhythm. She learned that Mia had nightmares about fire, and that Leo was allergic to strawberries. She learned that Alethea Moretti rarely slept. Late at night, when she got up to get water, she would see the light under his office door. Sometimes she heard him shouting. Sometimes she heard the dull thud of something heavy hitting something soft. She learned to walk quickly back to her room during those times, but the tension in the house was rising. Alethea was hunting. The poisoning at the restaurant hadn't been an accident, and it hadn't been random. One rainy Tuesday, Alethea summoned Agnes to his office. The room smelled of cigar smoke and old leather. Alethea was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, his tie loosened. He looked exhausted. Standing in the corner was Russo, the head of security, looking grim. "Sit," Alethea commanded. Agnes sat. "Is everything okay with the kids? They're sleeping?" "The kids are fine," Alethea said. He slid a folder across the desk. "Open it." Agnes opened the folder. Inside were photos of a warehouse, bodies, and crates of bottles. "We found the source," Alethea said, his voice void of emotion. "The apple juice. It was intercepted at the distribution center. Someone injected the bottles with a concentrated synthetic opioid. Liquid death. They resealed the caps with a machine that matches the factory specs perfectly." Agnes felt sick. Who would do that to children? It wasn't about the children. Russo grunted from the corner. It was a message. They wanted the boss to watch them die. "Who?" Agnes asked. "The Salazar cartel," Alethea said. "They want my territory in the harbor. They thought killing my heirs would break me." He stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against the edge, inches from Agnes. "But here is the problem, Agnes. The distribution center is secure. My men guard it. The only way someone knew which shipment was going to the Gilded Lily is if someone told them." Agnes's breath hitched. "You think it's an inside job. I know it is," Alethea said softly. His eyes bored into hers. "I have 50 men on my payroll. 3 housekeepers, 2 chefs, and you." "Me?" Agnes stood up, offended. "I saved their lives. Or maybe you were the clean-up crew," Alethea said, playing devil's advocate. "Maybe you saved them to gain my trust, to get inside my house." "That's insane," Agnes spat. "I was a waitress. I have a junkie brother and $400 in my bank account." Alethea stared at her for a long, agonizing silence. He was reading her, looking for a twitch, a sweat bead, a lie. Then the tension broke. He sighed and rubbed his temples. "I know. I ran your background. You're clean. You're the only person in this house I know is clean, because you weren't here when the plan was made." He reached out and, surprisingly, touched her chin. His thumb brushed a fading bruise on her cheekbone. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice suddenly shifting from interrogator to protector. Agnes pulled back. "It's nothing. I walked into a door." "Liar," Alethea whispered. "Was it the brother? The addict?" "He didn't mean it," Agnes defended instinctively. "He was high. He needed money." Alethea's jaw tightened. "If he touches you again, I will break his hands." "Don't touch him," Agnes warned, her protective instinct flaring. "He's sick. He's all I have." "No," Alethea said, stepping closer, his large frame eclipsing the light. "He's not all you have. Not anymore." The air between them crackled. It was dangerous. It was unprofessional. For a moment, Agnes thought he might kiss her. Crash. The sound of shattering glass from the hallway broke the moment. Alethea had a gun in his hand before Agnes even registered the noise. He pushed Agnes behind him. "Stay here." He moved to the door, throwing it open. In the hallway, a maid was standing over a broken vase, trembling. She was young, new. I'm sorry, sir. I slipped," she cried, picking up the shards. Alethea lowered the gun, but he didn't relax. "Clean it up, then get out." He turned back to Agnes, the moment of intimacy gone, replaced by the soldier. "Go back to the twins. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me or Russo." Agnes nodded and hurried out. As she passed the maid, she paused. The maid was scrubbing the floor, weeping, but Agnes noticed something. The maid's hands were shaking, yes, but she was wearing a bracelet. A thick, silver charm bracelet. It chimed softly as she moved. Agnes frowned. She walked back to the nursery, her mind racing. She had seen that bracelet before. Where? She entered the twins' room. They were still napping. She sat on the edge of the bed, thinking. The restaurant. The night of the poisoning. A woman had bumped into Agnes near the service station right before the Morettis arrived. A woman in a heavy coat. Agnes remembered the sound. The chime of silver charms. Agnes's blood ran cold. The maid wasn't just a maid. Agnes stood up, her heart hammering. She needed to tell Alethea. She turned to the door, but the handle slowly turned. Agnes froze. Alethea had said lock the door. She had locked it. She was sure of it. But the lock clicked open from the outside. A key. The door creaked open. It wasn't Alethea. It was the maid. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face was stone cold. In her hand, she didn't have a dustpan. She had a syringe. Shh, the maid whispered, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. Let the little angels sleep. Agnes backed up, placing herself between the woman and the cribs. She reached into her pocket. She didn't have a gun. She didn't have a knife. But she had the taser Alethea gave her. Get out, Agnes warned, her voice trembling but loud. Don't be a hero, Waitress, the maid sneered, raising the syringe. Salazar pays better than Moretti. She lunged. The syringe glinted in the dim light of the nursery, a silver fang poised to strike. Agnes didn't think. Thinking took time, and she didn't have any. She acted on pure, terrifying instinct. As the woman lunged, Agnes threw her body to the left, crashing into a rocking chair. The maid, Greta was it, slashed the air where Agnes's neck had been a second before. You stupid girl, Greta hissed, pivoting with military precision. I'm not here for you. Move, and you live. No, Agnes gasped, scrambling to her feet, blocking the path to the cribs where Leo and Mia were beginning to stir. Greta lunged again, this time leading with a kick. Her boot connected with Agnes's stomach. The air exploded from Agnes's lungs. She doubled over, gagging, falling to her knees. The taser in her pocket felt a mile away. Greta stepped over her, moving toward Leo's crib. She raised the syringe. Not again. Not on my watch. Agnes let out a guttural scream, grabbing Greta's ankle and yanking with every ounce of strength she possessed. Greta lost her balance, crashing face first onto the plush carpet. The syringe flew from her hand, skittering under the dresser. You bitch! Greta roared, rolling over and driving a fist into Agnes's jaw. Stars exploded in Agnes's vision. Her head snapped back, tasting copper. Greta was on top of her instantly, hands closing around Agnes's throat. The pressure was immense. Black spots danced in Agnes's eyes. She clawed at Greta's face, her eyes, anything. But the woman was trained. She was strong. I'm going to die, Agnes thought, the room starting to dim. I'm going to die in a billionaire's nursery. Her hand flailed against the floor, fingers brushing against cold plastic. The taser. It had fallen out of her pocket during the tackle. Agnes gripped it. She didn't have the angle to aim. She didn't check the safety. She just jammed it blindly into the side of Greta's ribcage and squeezed the trigger. Zap crack. The sound was like a whip crack in the small room. Greta convulsed, her back arching violently. She screamed, a high, piercing sound that finally woke the twins completely. Leo and Mia started wailing. Greta collapsed sideways, twitching, her muscles seizing. Agnes scrambled backward, coughing, gasping for air, clutching the taser like a lifeline. She crawled toward the cribs, putting herself between the writhing assassin and the children. "Daddy!" Mia screamed. The door burst open with such force the wood splintered near the hinges. Alethea Moretti stood there. He didn't look like a man. He looked like a natural disaster. His gun was drawn, his eyes scanning the room in a microsecond. He saw the twins crying in their cribs. He saw the maid twitching on the floor. He saw Agnes, bruised, bleeding from the lip, holding a taser with shaking hands. "Clear!" Alethea shouted, though he was the only one in the room. Russo and 2 other guards flooded in behind him. "Get the children!" Alethea barked at Russo. "Take them to the safe room. Now!" Russo scooped up the sobbing twins. Alethea holstered his gun and walked over to Greta, who was trying to crawl toward the door. He stepped on her hand. Hard. A sickening crunch echoed in the room. Greta whimpered, all fight gone. "Take this trash to the basement," Alethea ordered the other guards. "Keep her alive. I want to know everything she knows. I want to know who her mother is. I want to know what she ate for breakfast. Do not let her die." The guards dragged the woman out. Alethea turned to Agnes. The adrenaline finally abandoned her. Agnes slumped against the wall, her hands shaking so hard she dropped the taser. She tried to stand, but her legs were water. Alethea was there in an instant. He caught her before she hit the floor. I stopped her," Agnes whispered, her voice raspy from the strangulation. "The syringe, under the dresser." "Shh," Alethea murmured. He swept her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. He didn't take her to the hospital. He didn't take her to the staff quarters. He carried her down the hall to the master wing, the forbidden zone. He kicked open the door to a massive bathroom, larger than her entire apartment, clad in black marble. He set her down on the vanity counter. "Stay," he commanded. He rummaged through the cabinet and pulled out a first aid kit that looked more like a field medic's trauma bag. He wet a cloth with warm water and stepped between her legs, gently tilting her chin up. "She hurt you," Alethea said. It wasn't a question. His voice was low, dangerous, but his touch was impossibly gentle as he wiped the blood from her lip. "I'm okay," Agnes winced. I heard the bracelet. It was the same sound." Alethea froze. "The bracelet?" "At the restaurant," Agnes explained, her eyes meeting his. "The woman who bumped me. I heard the charms. When the maid was cleaning, I heard it again." Alethea stared at her. A mix of awe and fury swirled in his dark eyes. "You remembered a sound from 3 weeks ago." "I notice things," she whispered. "I have to." Alethea dropped the cloth. He placed his hands on either side of her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. The intimacy was electric, sudden, and overwhelming. "You saved my children twice," he said roughly. "You fought a trained cartel assassin with a taser." "Why?" "Because they're babies, Alethea. They're innocent." "And you?" he asked, leaning in closer. "Are you innocent, Agnes?" His lips were inches from hers. Agnes's heart hammered against her ribs, harder than when she was fighting Greta. She wanted to close the gap. She wanted to feel safety for the first time in her life. "Boss," Russo's voice from the doorway shattered the moment. Alethea pulled back, his mask of stoicism slamming back into place. He turned to face his head of security. "Speak!" Alethea growled. "We cracked the maid's phone," Russo said. He looked uncomfortable. He looked at Agnes, then back to Alethea. "You need to see this, boss." Alethea looked at Agnes one last time, a look of lingering heat, before walking to the door. "Rest, Agnes. Do not leave this room." He left. The door clicked shut. Agnes sat on the cold marble, touching her swollen lip. She felt safe. She was wrong. An hour passed. Agnes washed her face and paced the master bathroom. The silence in the house was heavy, oppressive. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Alethea the protector who walked in. It was Alethea the Don. His jacket was off, his sleeves were rolled up. There was a single drop of blood on his white shirt collar that wasn't there before. But it was his eyes that terrified her. They were ice. Dead. Empty. "Get up," he said. "Alethea, what happened? Did she talk? Get up." He grabbed her arm, not gently. He hauled her off the counter and marched her out of the room. "Alethea, you're hurting me." "Not yet," he muttered. He dragged her down the grand staircase, past the bewildered staff, and out the front door. The rain was pouring down now, a torrential storm that battered the driveway. He shoved her into the back of the armored SUV and climbed in beside her. "Drive," he told the driver. "Where are we going?" Agnes cried, clutching her bruised stomach. "What did I do?" Alethea didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead at the rain-slicked road. "We found the texts on the assassin's phone, messages coordinating the attack, updates on my security rotation, updates on me." "So?" "The messages came from a number in Queens," Alethea said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, a number registered to a prepaid burner phone. Agnes felt a pit open in her stomach. I don't know what that means. Alethea turned his head slowly. The look of betrayal on his face was heartbreaking. The final text, sent 5 minutes before she entered the nursery, said, "Coast is clear. She's in the bathroom. Do it now." Agnes shook her head. "I didn't send that. I was in the bathroom." "Exactly," Alethea snapped. "Only one person knew you were in the bathroom at that exact moment. Only one person could have given the signal to bypass you. Alethea, please, I fought her." "Or you put on a show," he countered coldly. "Maybe you got cold feet. Maybe you wanted a bigger payout." "No!" Agnes screamed. "I would never hurt them." "We'll see." The car ride was silent after that. 30 minutes of suffocating dread. They drove deep into the industrial district of Brooklyn, pulling up to an abandoned shipping warehouse. The car stopped. Alethea opened the door and pulled Agnes out into the rain. He marched her toward the rusty metal doors. 2 guards stood outside. They opened the doors. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous and smelled of rust and damp concrete. In the center of the room, a single light bulb hung from a wire. Under the light was a chair. Zip-tied to the chair, beaten, bloody, and weeping, was Toby. "Toby!" Agnes screamed, trying to run to him. Alethea's arm shot out, a steel bar across her chest, holding her back. "Agnes!" Toby looked up through swollen eyes. "Agnes, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Agnes froze. "Toby, what are you talking about?" Alethea walked forward, circling the chair like a shark. "Tell her, Tobias. Tell your sister how you paid your drug debt." Toby sobbed, his body shaking. "I didn't know. They said they just wanted to rob the place. They said they wanted the art." "You gave them the layout," Alethea said calmly. "You gave them the shift change times. You told them Agnes was the nanny." "They threatened to kill me," Toby wailed. "I owed Salazar 10 grand, Agnes. They said if I gave them the info, the debt was wiped. I didn't know they were going to hurt the kids." Agnes felt the world tilt. She fell to her knees on the wet concrete. It was true. The text message, "Coast is clear." Toby must have been tracking her. She texted him all the time, just going to the bathroom, then checking the kids. She had texted him that exact message an hour ago. He had forwarded it to the killer, her brother, the boy she had starved for, the boy she had saved from overdoses a dozen times. He had sold 2 children for a bag of powder. Alethea pulled a gun from his waistband, a matte black revolver. He spun the cylinder. He walked over to Agnes and crouched down. He pressed the cold steel into her hand. "He is a liability," Alethea whispered in her ear. "He nearly killed my children. He betrayed you. As long as he breathes, the Salazars have a way to get to you, and through you, to me." He stood up, towering over her. "He dies tonight, Agnes. The only question is who pulls the trigger." Alethea pointed at the sobbing boy in the chair. "Prove to me you aren't part of this. Prove your loyalty. Finish it." Agnes stared at the gun in her hand. It was heavy. She looked at Toby. He wasn't even begging anymore. He just looked pathetic. Broken. "Agnes, please," Toby whispered. "You almost killed them, Toby," Agnes said, her voice hollow. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the rain dripping from her hair. "Leo and Mia, they're babies." "I needed the fix," Toby cried. "I needed it." Alethea watched her, his face unreadable. "Do it, Agnes. Cut the cancer out. Be free." Agnes raised the gun. Her hand was shaking violently. She aimed it at her brother's chest. She pulled the hammer back. Click. The sound echoed through the warehouse. Agnes closed her eyes. She took a breath. She spun around and pointed the gun directly at Alethea's heart. "No," she said. The guards raised their rifles instantly, a dozen red laser dots appearing on Agnes's chest. Alethea didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He looked at the gun barrel inches from his chest, then up at Agnes's weeping, furious eyes. "You would die for a junkie?" Alethea asked softly. "He's my brother," Agnes sobbed. "He's sick. He's an idiot. But he's my blood. If you want him dead, you have to go through me. Just like the assassin had to go through me to get to your kids." She stepped closer, pressing the barrel into Alethea's expensive shirt. "I am not a killer, Alethea. I save people, that's what I do. If you can't see the difference between a mistake and malice, then shoot us both." Silence stretched. The tension was thick enough to choke on. The guards' fingers tightened on their triggers. Alethea stared at her. For 10 seconds, nobody breathed. Then slowly, the corner of Alethea's mouth twitched. He reached out, wrapped his hand around the barrel of the gun, and gently lowered it. He waved his other hand at the guards. The red dots vanished. "You pass," Alethea said. "What?" Agnes gasped, the gun slipping from her fingers. "If you had shot him," Alethea said, his voice grim, "I would have known you were cold enough to be working for Salazar. Only a psychopath kills their own family without hesitation." He looked at Toby, disgust plain on his face. "Russo! Boss? Cut him loose. Put him in the car." "We're letting him go?" Russo asked, incredulous. "No," Alethea said, his eyes locking on Agnes's. "We're taking him to the clinic in Vermont, the secure one. He stays there until he's clean. If he leaves before the doctors say so, then you kill him." Agnes let out a sob of relief, collapsing against Alethea's chest. He caught her, wrapping his arms around her tightly, burying his face in her wet hair. "You are infuriating," he whispered into her ear, "and you are mine." Agnes looked up. "Does this mean I'm not fired?" Alethea smirked, the first genuine smile she had ever seen on him. "Fired? Agnes, after tonight, I'm afraid you've been promoted." "To what?" "To the only position that matters." But before he could kiss her, before the moment could resolve, Russo's phone rang. Russo answered it, listened for a second, and his face went pale. "Boss," Russo said, his voice cracking, "we have a problem." "What now?" Alethea snapped, still holding Agnes. "The basement," Russo said. "The guards. They're dead. Throat slit." Alethea stiffened. "And the prisoner? Greta?" "Gone," Russo said. "And boss, the security footage shows she didn't break out. Someone let her out." Alethea pushed Agnes behind him, his gun back in his hand. "Who?" Russo swallowed hard. "Your brother. Julian." The drive back to Sands Point was a blur of rain and speed. The armored SUV tore down the highway at 110 miles per hour, hydroplaning over puddles that would have wrecked a lesser car. Alethea sat in the back, reloading his revolver. His face was a mask of cold, terrifying calculation. "Julian," he muttered, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "My own brother." "Why would he do it?" Agnes asked, clutching the leather seat. She was still shivering from the warehouse, from the gun she almost fired, from the revelation of Toby's betrayal. "Because he thinks I am weak," Alethea said, snapping the cylinder shut. "He thinks having children made me soft. He thinks mourning my wife made me vulnerable. He wants the throne, and he was willing to use the Salazars to empty it." He looked at Agnes. "The safe room is designed to withstand a bomb, but Julian designed the security codes. If he overrides the lock—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. When they screeched through the front gates of the estate, the scene was chaos. The perimeter lights were out. The front door was wide open. "Stay in the car," Alethea ordered. "No," Agnes said, opening her door. "Those are my kids in there too." Alethea looked at her, really looked at her, and nodded once. "Stay behind me. If I fall, you take the gun and you finish it." They moved into the house like ghosts. The hallway was dark, lit only by flashes of lightning through the high windows. Bodies of loyal guards were strewn across the marble floor. They heard voices coming from the library, the entrance to the panic room. Alethea signaled for silence. They crept closer. Julian Moretti stood by the hidden bookshelf door, typing furiously on a keypad. He looked like Alethea, but sharper, hungrier. Beside him stood Greta, the assassin, nursing her broken hand, and holding a silenced pistol. "Open it," Greta hissed. "We don't have time. Alethea will be back." "I'm trying," Julian snapped. He changed the encryption. "The paranoid bastard." "If we can't open it, we burn the house down," Greta suggested coldly. "Smoke them out." Agnes's breath hitched. Smoke. The ventilation. The panic room had an independent air supply, but the intake vents were located in the garden. If they blocked them... Alethea stepped out from the shadows. "Hello, Julian." Julian spun around, going for his gun, but Alethea was faster. He put a bullet into Julian's shoulder before his brother could even lift his arm. Julian screamed, dropping his weapon and falling against the bookshelf. Greta raised her gun, but Alethea shifted his aim instantly. Bang! Greta crumpled, a single clean shot to the chest. The threat of the assassin was gone. But Julian was still laughing. He clutched his bleeding shoulder, sliding down to the floor, a manic grin on his face. "You can't kill me, Dom," Julian wheezed. "I'm your blood." "You lost that right when you targeted my children." Alethea walked forward, the gun leveled at his brother's head. "Go ahead," Julian spat. "Shoot me, but you'll never get them out. I triggered the lockdown protocol before you shot me. The door is sealed. The timer is set to purge the oxygen in 10 minutes unless I input the biometrics. You kill me, you kill them." Alethea froze. The lockdown protocol. It was a fail-safe against intrusion. If the system detected a breach, it sealed the room and scrubbed the air to prevent gas attacks. Only the master administrator could stop it. Julian was the administrator. "Input the code," Alethea growled, pressing the gun to Julian's forehead. "No," Julian smiled, teeth red with blood. "I want to watch you beg. I want you to know that your weakness, your love for those brats, is what killed them." Alethea's hand trembled. He couldn't shoot. If he did, Leo and Mia would suffocate. Agnes stepped forward. "He's lying," she said. Julian's eyes flicked to her. "Who is this? The help?" "I'm the nanny," Agnes said, her voice steady. She walked past Alethea, right up to Julian. "Agnes, get back," Alethea warned. "He's lying, Alethea," Agnes repeated, staring down at the bleeding man. "I've been in that room. I checked the specs. The oxygen purge doesn't happen on a timer. It happens on a sensor." She knelt down, her face inches from Julian's. "You're not waiting for them to die, Julian. You're stalling. You're waiting for backup." Julian's smile faltered. "How would a waitress know that?" he sneered. "Because," Agnes said, reaching into a pocket and pulling out the black card Alethea had given her that first night. "I do my homework." She turned to Alethea. "Shoot him." "If you're wrong," Alethea whispered, the gun shaking. "I'm not wrong. He's bluffing. He wants to keep you talking until his men arrive. Look at his watch. He keeps checking it." Alethea looked. Julian glanced at his wrist instinctively. That was the tell. Alethea's expression hardened into granite. "Goodbye, brother." "Wait, no, I can stop it!" Julian screamed, the bravado shattering. Bang! The shot echoed through the library. Julian Moretti slumped to the floor, silence claiming him. Alethea stood there for a second, the smoking gun at his side. Then he rushed to the keypad. He typed in his own code. Access denied. "Agnes!" Alethea turned to her, panic rising. "It's not opening." "Move!" Agnes said. She pushed him aside. She didn't type a code. She reached under the keypad and ripped off the plastic casing. Wires spilled out. "Toby taught me how to hotwire a fuse box," she muttered, her fingers working fast. "The lock is electronic. If I short the circuit, the magnets disengage." "You're going to fry the system," Alethea said. "That's the point." She grabbed 2 exposed wires. "This is going to sting." She shoved the wires together. A spark showered down, burning her fingertips. She cried out but didn't let go. There was a loud pop, the smell of ozone, and then clunk. The heavy locking mechanism groaned. Alethea grabbed the handle and hauled the heavy steel door open. Inside, huddled in the corner under a blanket, were Leo and Mia. They were crying, terrified, but alive. Their lips were pink. "Daddy!" They ran to him. Alethea fell to his knees, scooping them up, burying his face in their necks, breathing in their scent. He held them so tight it looked painful, rocking back and forth. Agnes leaned against the doorframe, sucking on her burned fingers, watching them. A smile touched her lips. Alethea looked up. His eyes were wet. "You saved us," he said. "Again." "It's the job," Agnes shrugged, though her voice was thick with emotion. Alethea stood up, holding a child in each arm. He walked over to Agnes. He didn't say anything else. He just leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. "No," he whispered. "It's not a job. It's a life." 6 months later. The Gilded Lily was under new management. The old manager, Gerard, had been fired for health code violations. At the corner booth, a family was eating. Alethea Moretti sat at the head of the table, relaxed, laughing at something his son said. Leo was eating pasta with gusto. Mia was drawing on a placemat. And sitting beside Alethea, no longer in a uniform, but in a silk dress that matched the blue of her eyes, was Agnes. "Agnes, look." Leo held up a piece of broccoli. "I'm eating the trees." "Good job, buddy," Agnes smiled, wiping a spot of sauce from his chin. She glanced at Alethea. He was watching her, that intense, protective gaze never wavering. He reached under the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing the faint scar on her finger where the electrical burn had healed. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. Agnes looked at the twins, healthy and safe. She thought of Toby, 6 months clean and working at a horse ranch in Vermont, fully paid for by the Moretti Scholarship Fund. She squeezed Alethea's hand. "Yeah," she said, "I can finally breathe." Alethea smiled, raised his glass of sparkling water, and toasted. "To breathing," he said. Agnes clinked her glass against his. "To breathing." And that is how a single gesture, a waitress checking for blue lips instead of just calling 911, toppled an empire and built a family. It's a reminder that sometimes the strongest soldiers aren't the ones holding the guns. They're the ones holding the cure.